Dear students, welcome back. Now we are going to see the intercostal muscles. The intercostal muscles are the intrinsic muscles of the thorax. The intercostal muscles are three types. One is the external intercostal muscle. Next one is the internal intercostal muscle, and the innermost intercostal muscle, that is the transverse thoracic muscle. Okay, what are the muscles? Intercostal muscle, that is the external intercostal muscle, internal intercostal muscle, and deeply placed muscle, that is innermostly present intercostal muscle, is called as transverse thoracic. So, and also another set, in addition to this thing, another set of muscles called as levatorus costorum is present, which is present on the posterior aspect. These group of muscle, this set of levatorus costorum, which are connecting to the vertebral bodies on the posterior side, the transverse processes of the thoracic vertebrae. Okay. Now we are going to see one by one. The first one is the external intercostal muscle. This is the external intercostal muscle. The name itself indicates it is present externally. So there are 11 pairs of external intercostal muscles are present. From where to where it is going to extend, now we are going to see. In each intercostal space, so this is one rib and this is one rib, this is one intercostal space. So in each intercostal space, it extends from the level of the rib behind the costal cartilage, level of the tubercle of the rib. It extends from the level of the tubercle of the rib behind to the level of the costal cartilage in front. So that means, so posteriorly we know that the rib is having a neck and it is having tubercle, isn't it? From the tubercle, this muscle is getting started. So, and it is starting from posterior to and come it's anteriorly up to the costal cartilage, up to the costal cartilage. So you can see here the muscle is ending at this part on the anterior aspect. So the muscle is ending here, and here you'll have the costal cartilages. Here for each rib you'll have the costal cartilages. So up to this costal cartilages, this muscle is extending in front, from where it is replaced by the anterior intercostal membrane. Anterior intercostal membrane. That means from here the muscle fibers are present. After that, it is ended as, normally every muscle is ending up as a tendon, but not here. So here it ends up as an anterior intercostal membrane, anterior intercostal membrane over the, and it is attached to the sternum. Okay. So again we will see. So there are 11 pairs of external intercostal muscles are there. In each intercostal space, it extends from the level of the tubercle of the rib behind to the level of the costal cartilage, anteriorly, that is in front, where it is replaced by anterior intercostal membrane. After that, the fibers are not present, it forms as a membrane anteriorly. What is that membrane called? Anterior intercostal membrane. Now that is the extension of the external intercostal muscle. So in each intercostal space, it extends from the level of the tubercle behind to the level of the costal cartilage in front, where it is replaced by the anterior intercostal membrane. So that is the extent of external intercostal muscle. Now coming to the attachments. So each muscle stretches from the lower border of the from the lower border of the rib above, from the lower border of the rib above to the upper border of the rib below, to the upper border of the rib below. So intercostal muscle is also attached like this only to the upper rib and lower rib. But when you see these two muscles, this muscle is present somewhat outwards, that is somewhat externally this muscle is placed. So it is called as external intercostal muscle. Okay, so each muscle stretches from the lower border of the rib above to the upper border of the rib below. So, and the fibers is directed downwards. You can see the fibers are directed downwards and also forwards. You can see forwards. So the fibers are coming forwards, and also medially the fibers are coming medially. So these are the direction of the external intercostal muscles. Okay, so the fibers in the external intercostal muscle runs downwards, forwards. So it runs downwards, forwards and medially. So these fibers, how easily you can remember by like this. So normally you can put your hands in your pant pockets, side pockets. That is the way of these external intercostal muscles are present. Okay, so how you will move your hand into that pocket, so the same way the external intercostal muscle fibers will run. That means each muscle fibers directed downwards, forwards and medially. This is about external intercostal muscle. This muscle is supplied by these muscles are supplied by the intercostal nerves. So external intercostal muscles are supplied by intercostal nerves. Now coming to the internal intercostal muscle. So here this is the internal intercostal muscle. So there are 11 pairs of internal intercostal muscles. In each intercostal space, it extends from the lateral margin. So here we are having sternum, isn't it? So from the lateral margin of the sternum anteriorly to the level of angle of rib. So here we are having some angle of the rib. Up to here this muscle will run like this. So anterior to posterior these fibers are present, and from there it is replaced by posterior intercostal membrane. From there it is replaced by posterior intercostal membrane, extends from the costotransverse ligament posteriorly to continuous anteriorly with a thin fascia between external and internal intercostal muscles. So again we will see this internal intercostal muscles. So this internal intercostal muscles in each intercostal space, it extends from the lateral margins of the sternum. Here you'll have the sternum, lateral margins of the sternum. Here it is extending. So and it runs up to the level of the angle of the rib, where it is replaced by the posterior intercostal membrane. Anteriorly it is replaced by anterior intercostal membrane, isn't it? So the posterior intercostal membrane, so from where to where this posterior intercostal membrane extends means it extends from the costotransverse ligament. We know that at that angle of, by the side of the angle will have the tubercle, isn't it? And it is having a non-articular end where this costotransverse ligament is getting attached. So from that area, this posterior intercostal membrane extends posteriorly to be continuous anteriorly with a thin fascia. So that means, so from angle of the rib to tubercle it will go, and again it continues as a thin fascia between the external intercostal muscle and the internal intercostal muscles, which comes anteriorly. Again this membrane comes in between these two muscles up to anterior side. Okay, so again remember that, so external intercostal muscle will starts from posterior and ends up at the anterior end of the thorax as a anterior intercostal membrane, whereas the internal intercostal muscle starts anteriorly and it is ending up to the angle of the rib. From there it is replaced as posterior intercostal membrane. This posterior intercostal membrane extends to the costotransverse ligament, and again it runs anteriorly as a thin fascia between this external intercostal muscle and internal intercostal muscles, continuous anteriorly in between these two muscles up to the wherever these two muscles are present, up to that area this posterior intercostal membrane is extending anteriorly as a thin fascia. Okay, this is about the internal intercostal muscle extension. Now coming to the attachments of this internal intercostal muscle. So this internal intercostal muscle, above it is attached to the costal groove of the upper rib. It is attached to the costal groove of the upper rib. Below to the upper border of the succeeding rib. That means next ribbon. So above it is attached to the costal groove of the upper rib. Below it is attached to the upper border of the succeeding rib. Now we'll see the directions. So how the fibers will move. So in this, the fibers are moving upwards. The fibers are moving upwards, forwards and medially. Upwards, forwards and medially. So this is the direction of internal intercostal muscles. Upwards, forwards and medially. Upwards, forward and medially. So this is about the internal intercostal muscle. This muscle is also supplied by the intercostal nerves. Okay. So how many intercostal muscles are there? There are three intercostal muscles. One is the external intercostal, internal intercostal and deeply placed thoracis transversus. So this thoracis transversus is of again three types, and one is subcostalis, intercostalis intimi and the sternocostalis. So these deeply placed muscles we can see in the next video. Okay, so This is about the external intercostal muscle and the internal intercostal muscles. Okay, thank you.